Throughout human history, punishments have varied in severity, from swift executions to prolonged suffering meant to serve as a warning. Among these, Scaphism stands out as one of the most horrifying methods of execution ever devised. Used by the ancient Persians, this method was not about quick justice, but about dragging a person's suffering to its absolute limit. It was designed to prolong agony for as many days as possible, ensuring that the condemned endured extreme torment before death. Unlike other forms of execution that relied on weapons, Scaphism used nature itself, water, insects, and decay to break the victim's body over time. The origins of Scaphism date back to the Achaemenid Empire, which ruled Persia from the 6th to the 4th century BCE. The Persians were known for their strict legal system, which reserved the harshest punishments for those who committed serious crimes such as treason, murder, or offenses against the king. Scaphism was one such punishment, intended to not only kill the accused, but to make their suffering an unforgettable lesson for others. The most famous account of Scaphism comes from the Greek historian Plutarch, who detailed the case of a Persian soldier named Mithridates. His ordeal, which lasted over 2 weeks, provides a chilling glimpse into just how cruel this punishment was. The process of Scaphism was as elaborate as it was merciless. The condemned person was first stripped naked and placed between 2 wooden boats, or inside a hollowed-out log, with their head, arms, and legs left exposed. The rest of their body was trapped inside, making escape impossible. Once secured, the executioners force-fed the victim a mixture of milk and honey. At first glance, this might seem like an act of kindness, but it was a calculated step to weaken the body. The excessive food intake led to severe digestive issues, making the person unable to control their bodily functions. This, in turn, created an unsanitary environment, attracting insects that would soon swarm the helpless prisoner. To make the suffering worse, the executioners smeared honey on the victim's face, hands, and feet, ensuring that flies and other insects would constantly attack the exposed skin. The boats or log were then set adrift on a stagnant body of water, usually a swamp or a shallow lake, where insects thrived. As time passed, the person's body became a feeding ground for flies, beetles, and other creatures which laid eggs in open wounds and orifices. These insects, drawn to the decaying flesh, made the experience increasingly unbearable. The victim remained alive through all of this, weakened by hunger, dehydration, and infections, yet unable to escape the relentless attack of nature. The most infamous case of Scaphism involved Mithridates, a Persian soldier who had unintentionally revealed a crucial secret that led to the death of a nobleman. His crime was considered so severe that the authorities decided he deserved the most prolonged and painful punishment possible. Plutarch recounts that Mithridates endured Scaphism for an astonishing 17 days. During this time, he suffered from insect bites, festering wounds, and the unbearable heat of the Persian sun. His body, covered in sores and infection, slowly deteriorated while he remained conscious of his own decline. His death was not immediate. It came gradually through a combination of exhaustion, starvation, and the effects of decay. What made Scaphism particularly terrifying was its drawn-out nature. Unlike other methods of execution that ended in minutes or hours, Scaphism was designed to keep the victim alive for as long as possible while their body was systematically destroyed. The Persians used it not just as a punishment but as a warning, ensuring that anyone who witnessed it would think twice before committing a similar crime. The fact that a person could remain alive for over 2 weeks while enduring such extreme conditions speaks to the sheer brutality of this method. Over time, Scaphism fell out of use, even within Persia. It was likely abandoned because of its extreme cruelty and impracticality. Other quicker execution methods became more common, such as beheading and hanging, which were still harsh, but far less drawn out. However, Scaphism remained infamous, its horror preserved in historical accounts. Even centuries later, historians and scholars continue to study this method as an example of just how far human societies once went to enforce their laws. In the modern world, executions have become far more humane, focusing on swift and painless methods. But looking back at punishments like Scaphism, it is clear how much societies have changed. The very idea of a person being trapped in a boat, left to suffer for weeks as insects slowly consumed their body, is almost unimaginable today. Yet for those who lived under the Persian Empire, it was a very real possibility, one that no doubt haunted those who ever found themselves at risk of displeasing the ruling class. Few punishments in history matched the cruelty of Scaphism. It was a death sentence, but one designed to last for days or even weeks, ensuring that the condemned experienced every possible form of suffering before the end. In the Persian Empire, some crimes were punishable by more than just death. They were punishable by suffering beyond comprehension. Throughout history, fire has been both a symbol of civilization and a tool of destruction. It has warmed homes, powered industries, and forged weapons, but it has also been used as a method of punishment. Among the many ways fire was used to execute criminals, heretics, and enemies of the state, one of the most terrifying was slow burning. Unlike a quick execution by beheading or hanging, slow burning was designed to stretch a person's suffering to its absolute limits. The very nature of fire made it an agonizing experience. Heat seared the skin, smoke choked the lungs, and the body was consumed inch by inch, all while the victim remained alive for as long as possible. The origins of slow burning as a form of punishment can be traced back to ancient times, but it became especially prominent during the Middle Ages and the early modern period. It was widely used in Europe, often as a public spectacle meant to strike fear into the hearts of onlookers. The Catholic Church used it as a primary method of executing those accused of heresy, particularly during the Inquisition. Monarchs and legal systems across different nations also employed it for crimes such as witchcraft, treason, and blasphemy. The execution was not just about death. It was about sending a message that certain offenses would be met with the most excruciating consequences imaginable. One of the most infamous cases of slow burning occurred in the 15th century with the execution of Joan of Arc. Accused of heresy and witchcraft, Joan was sentenced to be burned at the stake in Rouen, France, in 1431. Unlike some burnings that resulted in relatively quick deaths due to suffocation or intense flames, Joan's execution was deliberately drawn out. The English forces overseeing her death ensured that the fire started slowly, allowing the flames to rise gradually rather than engulfing her all at once. Witnesses reported that she remained conscious for much of the ordeal, suffering as the fire crept up her body. Her final moments were spent crying out to God, a haunting testament to the sheer horror of slow burning. The process of slow burning varied depending on the location and the executioner's intent. In some cases, the condemned were tied to a stake, with their feet placed on a bed of slow-burning embers. The fire was carefully controlled to ensure that it did not immediately consume the body. This method allowed the heat to gradually cook the flesh, while the person remained fully aware of their suffering. In other instances, executioners used a more brutal approach, burning the victim limb by limb, starting with the feet and working upward. This method ensured that the individual felt the agony of every stage before death finally took them. One particularly disturbing example of slow burning occurred during the Spanish Inquisition. The infamous auto da fe ceremonies often included executions by fire, with heretics and alleged witches subjected to prolonged burning. In some cases, the victims were strangled or garroted before the fire was lit, a so-called act of mercy meant to spare them the worst of the suffering. However, in many instances, the accused were left fully conscious as the flames did their work. The executioners sometimes used damp wood to produce more smoke and heat without creating large flames, ensuring that the condemned would suffocate slowly rather than dying quickly from the fire itself. Perhaps one of the cruelest aspects of slow burning was the use of tar and oils to prolong the agony. Some executioners would coat the victim's body in substances that burned slowly and at a lower temperature. This meant that the person did not immediately die from the fire itself, but instead experienced a gradual breakdown of their flesh. In medieval Europe, pitch and resin were commonly used to achieve this effect, ensuring that the pain lasted as long as possible. The public nature of these executions added another layer of horror. Burnings were often carried out in crowded town squares, with entire communities gathering to witness them. The sight of a person writhing in the flames, their screams echoing through the air, was meant to serve as a deterrent. Fear was the goal, and slow burning achieved it more effectively than almost any other form of punishment. Over time, the practice of slow burning declined, largely due to changing legal systems and evolving views on human rights. By the 18th century, most European nations had abandoned it in favor of more humane methods of execution, such as hanging or the guillotine. However, in some parts of the world, fire was still used as a tool of torture and punishment well into the modern era. The legacy of slow burning remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. It was a punishment not just about death, but about suffering, a method carefully designed to ensure that a person experienced pain in its most extreme form before finally succumbing. Even in an age where executions have become far less brutal, the sheer horror of slow burning continues to serve as a chilling reminder of how far societies once went to enforce their laws. Among the most horrifying methods of ancient execution, the brazen bull stands as one of the most sadistic inventions ever devised by humankind. Unlike other forms of punishment that relied on natural forces or the executioner's skill, the brazen bull was a meticulously designed instrument of torture that combined ingenuity with cruelty. Crafted to inflict suffering over an extended period, it was an execution method that turned death into a drawn-out ordeal, ensuring that the condemned person endured agonizing pain before finally succumbing to the effects of heat and suffocation. The origins of the brazen bull can be traced back to ancient Greece, specifically to the reign of Phalaris, the tyrant of Akragas, modern-day Agrigento, in Sicily during the 6th century BCE. According to legend, Phalaris was a ruler notorious for his cruelty, using any means possible to maintain control over his people. The brazen bull was one of his most infamous inventions, designed not only as an execution device, but as a form of psychological terror. It was a chilling example of how a tyrant could manipulate both technology and fear to maintain power. The structure of the brazen bull was deceptively simple but fiendishly effective. It was a hollow, life-sized bull made entirely of bronze, with a large chamber inside where the condemned would be placed. The victim was locked inside, their body confined within the tight, immobile space. The bull was then heated over a fire, turning the bronze to a searing temperature. As the heat intensified, the victim inside was subjected to excruciating pain as their skin and flesh were burned. The chamber was specifically designed to create an experience where the person could not escape or move away from the intense heat, with every inch of their body exposed to the fiery punishment. What made the brazen bull particularly horrifying was its design which ensured that the victim's screams would be part of the execution. The bull's head was intricately designed with hollow tubes connected to the nostrils and mouth. As the person inside screamed in agony, the sound would travel through these tubes, amplifying the cries and creating a chilling, eerie noise that echoed out of the bull's mouth. This amplification of suffering was intended to be heard by the people watching the execution, adding a psychological element to the punishment. It wasn't just the victim who endured the terror of the brazen bull. It was the onlookers as well. The sounds of the victim's pain were meant to create a lasting impact on the audience, a constant reminder of the consequences of defying the will of a tyrant. The true stories of those who endured the brazen bull are scarce, but there are accounts that have been passed down through ancient texts and oral tradition. The most famous of these is the tale of Phalaris's execution of the inventor of the bull, a man named Perilos of Athens. According to the legend, Perilos had designed the brazen bull for Phalaris as a means of executing those who had defied the ruler. Once the bull was completed, Phalaris decided to test it on Perilos himself. The inventor, having designed the device, was unsuspecting of the tyrant's cruelty. He was placed inside the bull, and the fire was set. His screams, channeled through the bull's tubes, echoed for all to hear. The legend serves as a grim reminder that no one, not even the creator of such a device, was spared from its horrors. The brazen bull's use was likely limited in practice, as it was both costly to construct and difficult to use on a large scale. Yet its reputation persisted throughout history, becoming synonymous with tyrannical cruelty. Over time, QA's execution methods evolved. The use of the brazen bull faded, replaced by quicker and more efficient forms of capital punishment. However, its legacy as one of the most ingenious yet sadistic inventions in the history of execution persists in the annals of ancient torture devices. Death was a long, agonizing, not just about the end of life, but about the unbearable journey toward it.